Hello, I'll be showing you how to make an MMD dance pad or an animation pad or whatever you might be calling it. It's just gonna depend on what you're using it for, which can be a variety of things for your game or just an MMD world like you have probably seen on VRChat, especially if you're on PC. Okay, first things first, we're just gonna put our cube and prepare everything. Or seats to be precise. Gonna resize it down, give it the VRC station, and make sure you have can use station from station disabled and seated disabled. The first one isn't really as important, but the seated one is essential. Now for our animation stuff, have your animation clip itself, and for every animation that you have, you want to make an animator controller, a separate one for it, because we can't mess with the parameters of the controller itself. And have an extra one that's going to be used to reset the player's animator. And now we'll make an empty game object to store our animators in. We can't actually just reference the controllers themselves, they have to be on animators. I'll talk about it more at the end. So the dance animator and the reset animator. And for each of them, we want to assign them an animator, of course, which can be done by just dragging our controllers over to the game objects. No need to change any of their settings. Now, here is the catch. To actually get everything working, you need to have an avatar project that we need for a script from it that's made by VRChat. Navigate to your project, then you'll go to Packages, VRChat Avatars, Runtime, SDK, Plugins, and we're gonna get this one, the first one, the VRC SDK 3A. Okay, now that it's imported, we can work on our controllers. We'll just put our animation clip, and the reason that we got our VRC plugin right here is for this, the animator tracking control. Set everything to animation, and after that, we'll go to our reset one, add an empty state, and use the same script. Just put everything to tracking. Now, that's going to be it for our setup. We can actually start writing our script. Set our variables. We need our VRC station and our animators. You could either put them in an array of animators or have each of them separate. I'll have them separate and should make it easier to just understand. So I'll start with my dance animator and now my reset animator. I'll be explaining more on how this works at the end. Now, since we're using a station and we're gonna be seating a player, it's a good idea to just store the player in a variable. Now in start, we're gonna get our station and our local player. For the station, we'll just use the game object getComponent method. You could make the station itself public or serialized, but since it's on the same game object the script will be on, I'll just use the getComponent method. Now we're gonna set our local player. And now it's your choice to decide how you're gonna make the player enter the station or begin the animation. You could either have it as a button, which is what I'm gonna be using here, or you could have it as an interact, like the stations you see on avatars and stuff. So for the button, going to be a public void and then whatever the name is. I'll just put it as button pressed. Now inside our button pressed, we're gonna take the station and set its animator controller to the animator of the dance. And that can be done with the runtime animator controller for the animator itself. Now we want to get our player into the seat. We'll be making it into a separate method because we need to have a delay between the setting of the station's animator controller and the player actually getting seated. I'll have it set to seat player, and it's just going to be for the seating. So station.use station, and then you'll pass in the player that you want to get seated, which in this case is just the local player. Now, when the button is pressed, we of course need to seat the player. So we're gonna call a method, but as I said earlier, we want it to be delayed. The delay only has to be 1 frame, really, that's more than enough. Now for handling the player exiting the station, you could also have that in many different ways, either as a button or just when the player normally exits, like just moving. It's up to you really. I'll have it get disabled whenever the player just moves out. And that can be done with another method that's called onStationExited. Delete the base code, and it's giving us a warning because this one is obsolete. It's been replaced with this form of it, where you would get the player that got exited. It's pretty useful to use because we can use an if statement to make sure that the only person that this ever happens to is the local player, which is good. We don't want it to happen to anyone else unless we want it to. Here we'll just set the station back to reset and make it reset again. Now, this all just assumes that you're gonna be using a button. If not, if you want it to be as a collider that you can click, we can just use the interact method. Inside our interact method, we'll just call for our button pressed, like so. And that is it for our code. We can now start assigning our variables. Okay, everything is going to be on the seat. I'm gonna assign my script on it and assign the dance animator and reset animator, which I seem to have misspelled. Doesn't really matter. Okay, and this is it. It's just a good idea to disable the animator's game objects. Now we can start the game and test it out. We can't actually test animation using client sim, so it has to be in-game. A good suggestion would probably be to not forget to assign your button if you're using that. So let's do that really quickly. I did not do that earlier. Totally not. Set its name to whatever the button one is. Like this, and now we can start the game. Okay, now that we're in game, let's just test it out really quickly. And here we go, our animation is playing. Really nice animation, right? So this is it for the tutorial. You can leave now. And as usual, I'll be talking about a few extra points just to clarify a bit more of what we're doing here. So to recap from the beginning, we take our clips and make an animator controller for each of them. We can't put everything in one animator controller because we cannot edit the parameters of the animator controller that's on our station. That's the first point. The second one, where we imported the VRChat plugin from an avatars project, is because we needed the animator tracking controller. We can use that to actually disable the player's tracking input like you would do if you're making an animation on your avatar. That's essential. We cannot go without that, otherwise your avatar will just not actually play any animation, and it will just keep following your head or your hand or whatever. The third thing is where we used animators instead of just putting the animator controllers inside of variables. I have no idea why that doesn't work. It must be an animator that you then take the controller from it. I've tried it before, it just doesn't work. I don't really know why. And now if you're wondering how would you do more than one animation, or how would you keep adding more and more and more, you'll simply just have each of your animation clips with its own animator controller that you would then, in your code, you would just simply switch the animator controller of the station itself. It should be simple, and I don't think it would need a tutorial since you already have the basics of how this works. Should be able to build on it now. If, however, you do need any help, I'm always here, and I'd be more than happy to provide more instructions. And I think that's everything that I wanted to explain. I may have forgotten a few things. Check the description. If I did, I would probably just put it in there. I hope this was helpful. Tell me about any ideas that you would like next. Preferably, again, stuff that just doesn't have a tutorial like this. It's a mystery how you make it, but if it's something that already has a tutorial, then there is no reason for me to do it really. There are much better tutorials out there. The next tutorial I'll be making is on how to lip sync your model or NPC in your world, and how to actually record it as clips that you can then play with audio or whatnot. That will be for the next one, which I'll be making soon, either in the next few days or next week. For now, goodbye.